Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season premiere of His Dark Materials, a great season premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So we don't know how long it's been since the season 2 finale. I mean, obviously part of it takes place immediately afterwards. Obviously it's been so long, so I actually don't know what I thought at the end of season 2, because I thought like, okay, Will's gonna go off on his own, get the blade to Azrael like his dad wanted him to, but I just rewatched season 2 finale and it was like, oh, never crossed my mind to be like, well, of course he'd go back to Lyra, because it's like, right, Lyra's not only his best friend, it's like the only friends he really had in such a long time, so of course he wasn't going to abandon her, because it's like, right, we're in this together, but by the time he got back, she was gone, and he has been searching every world to try and find her, but obviously no luck, and he still has a lithiometer. I wonder, I can only assume that, Marissa, Miss Coulter, did that on purpose. Because she knew that, like, right, she can't allow Lyra to have that in her possession, because it would give Lyra too much power and too much of a head start in front of her. So it's like, right, let me abandon this, which I think is kind of sad, because it's like, right, you're stripping away one of your daughters, like, because this isn't just some tool, it's a part of her, because Will says the same thing. It's like, right, it's just as much as a part of Lyra as it is, as like the knife is a part of me. And so, once again, he's traveling from world to world, and he runs into the angels, because the angels are looking for the blade. And it's so interesting finding out more and more about the angels. Obviously, we got introduced to them last season. It's also interesting, too, because one person we have not caught up with this season is Mary. We don't know, I mean, once again, it's only been the first episode, but it's like, we don't know where, last time we saw Mary, she was kind of in the mountainous areas, so we have no idea what she's finding, like her role to necessarily play in all of this. But, aside from all that, getting back to the angels, we find out that basically they're made of kind of pure dust, and whereas like Will can like see the seams that basically he has to cut through to open up windows to the other worlds, they can see them all the time and just easily like phase through it. Because you see at one point, Will cuts open a window and one of the angels just step forward. It's like phasing in and out of reality, which is almost like basically they can shift, like using dust as an example, they are able to shift their frequency to put them in the same wavelength and pass on to another world. So it's interesting in a much faster way. I mean, also they don't have to worry about the whole aspect of like, well, Will has to close a window. We haven't really come into that yet, because Will's always made sure to close a window after he's opened it. That has to come up this season about like, right, the ramifications, or whether it's a necessary part of this final fight or something that's going to come up where it's like, I mean, we've seen windows open, and I guess arguably you can make the argument that Boreal doing all that he was doing was a byproduct of a window, the catastrophic nature of having a window left open. I mean, well, and there's also like the more so specifically the one Azrael tore open, killing Roger, that like had catastrophic effects on their worlds, because obviously it's like melting like the polar ice caps and stuff. So like it's making it so that Yorick and his people are starving. Because the ice is melting, the seals are dying out, so they're running out of food. Plus, it led to, Gaza, the city where the subtle knife was, that ended up leading to a whole bunch of specters showing up there. So, you know. So, but maybe that's more so the catastrophic nature of it rather than Will. I mean, but maybe if Will left a certain window open long enough, maybe it could turn into an Azrael window incident or situation. Either way. But speaking of the angels, we find out an interesting thing about them is that the authority isn't like, he's like, oh, good, the Almighty or the Creator isn't an actual like God or anything. It's another angel who assumed that position. Apparently it's an angel with a dark angel by their side. So I was like, oh, so are we, I'm not the most religious person, but immediately I'm like, are we kind of going like, oh, I don't know if it's a 1-for-1, but for now I'll kind of attribute it to, it's almost like the Archangel Michael took over as like, well, since there's no God, I'll be God. Which I'm like, if I remember correctly, Supernatural kind of went down that route. Because obviously, like, there was no God for a while. So other angels kind of try to, like, fill that void to some extent. But to me, like, kind of using Supernatural, for example, it's like, you had one angel kind of rising above, kind of being the almighty, the authority. That's kind of that's Archangel Michael, and the dark angel by their side is Lucifer. You know what? I'm actually speaking of Lucifer. Lucifer would be a great example of that, because it's like, yeah, kind of the absentee father type of situation, and that, you know, I mean, obviously there's many direct parallels in that regard, but just like, right, God's not there, and someone else kind of had to feel that to some extent. That ends up being a main through line through Lucifer. Slight spoilers, I guess. Yes, but not really. Either way, that's interesting to know. And that's the angels basically, because they brought it up when they were talking to Mary last season. They want revenge. They want revenge against the authority because they fought and they were basically banished. So it's like, right, you're kind of doing like the biblical Lucifer fell. Well, because the one that's kind of like Azrael's angel second in command, I'm wondering, is that supposed to be like the Lucifer equivalency? Which would be interesting if that's the case, because it sounds like that angel's a woman, and it's just like, right, the only other thing I've ever known to change Lucifer's gender is the Sandman adaptation on Netflix, you know? Because more often than not, obviously, he's typically a dude. That's one of the only instances I know of Lucifer being a woman, so I thought that was kind of interesting. I mean, at least it seems, because they say her name, it's something with like an X, it's like, was it like Xenophenia or something like that? I'm butchering it, but I definitely was paying attention to subtitles. It's something with like an X. So I was like, maybe that's kind of like the parallel they're going for in some regard. But obviously it's like there's a dark angel by their side, but I don't know if that's necessarily supposed to be the Lucifer character or the one that's beside Azrael is supposed to be the Lucifer character. Because that was Lucifer's thing. Or rather, if we want to go by Lucifer's original name, like, it's Samael. So like Samael's original thing was like, right, a rebellion, and that's what Azrael's relating. So I mean, obviously, you know, it's so weird to think about. The fact is, I never really caught a lot of I know it's stupid. It's not until I was rewatching I was like, man, how did I not catch all this? I mean, the whole story is like a giant metaphor for religion and stuff like that, and obviously the corruption of like how religion as a faith and versus like religion as an institution. It's kind of, you know, I guess the original source material was kind of written to kind of be that, like, that battle with both, you know? So I think that's just kind of interesting. Predestination, predetermined by some greater power versus free will and stuff like that, so on and so forth. Because that plays into even this episode, because Azrael, I guess the machine him and his demon were in early in the episode is kind of like, I'm making all the references. It's like Barry from the Flash TV show. He couldn't travel to other worlds, other universes on his own. He needed at first like a tachyon device. That's how he first got to Supergirl's world, like Earth 38, from Earth 1 to Earth 38, was because he had like a tachyon thing that allowed him to punch through it and go to her Earth. So that's basically what Azrael has, because he doesn't have the energy of separating a child from their demon to open a portal like he did with Roger, nor does he have the subtle knife to help him do it, nor is he an angel, so he had to find another means, so he found machinery. And that's also something too, I didn't comment on it, but this episode, it feels so like the world he ends up in, like when you see like drones, it feels so weird, but it's like, right, these are like alternate worlds, and like just like the place they're in, you're like, oh man, the technology that advanced. Plus you're seeing it with machine, like pretty heavy guns, and you're like, but it's also like, right, because more often than not, you saw the authority with like magisterium with Gatling guns and stuff like that, but that was typically on their airships. More often than not, they had like rifles or something, like, you know, it seemed like Azrael came in packing like some pretty high, like heavy artillery, so that just kind of took me by surprise, in conjunction with like, yeah, because I think in my head, I kind of like, I treated Lyra's world almost like, oh, it was set back in time. It's like, no, it has some advancements in technology. Like, yes, planes aren't what they are in Will's world. You know, it's the best comparison I can make. It's like Full Metal Alchemist versus like Full Metal Alchemist, the first movie, Conquerors of Shambhala, like the very differences between those worlds, one without alchemy and one with. So it's like, yeah, this is a world, Lyra's world is a world with magic, Will's the one that's without it. So technology wouldn't it have advanced, but like there are direct parallels. I don't know, it's just a lot of stuff I feel like I didn't really pay as much attention to until like the second time through, because I believe this is the first time I've seen either season. I don't think I rewatched season 1 in preparation for season 2. Maybe I didn't, but once again, it's been so long. But yeah, this might have been the first time I rewatched any of those seasons, so a lot of that stuff landed even more for me. But regardless, getting into that conversation about the Authority, I mean, it makes sense. The Authority is supposed to be this powerful entity across every world in kind of this multiverse, and every world Azrael's going to, it's going by a different name, the religious power that's in place. And was it Ungunwi's, Algunwi's, I'm butchering his name too, the commander that he went to rescue this episode, which he had kind of like, I don't know if they're like fairies or whatever, but they were swift and deadly, helping him rescue that guy. But he's fighting against a group known as the Temple. They're his world's equivalency to the Magisterium. But Azrael has been to so many other worlds that have their own Magisterium or Temple in control. And it's all about the Authority being this one overarching figure that keeps everyone on their knees and bound. Because Azrael talked about it. It's like, I spent so much of my life fighting against the Magisterium, and they were just fleas in a bigger fight. The real fight is with the Authority. Until we cut off the Authority's head, the rest won't crumble until we do. And so it's him gathering, because he was gathering his forces while he was off screen, I think even all last season, but now he's still in a process of that. He's got a lot of his council ready, but he's going to need like, the commander he ran into this episode, which that actor, I've seen him in a multitude of things. I'm trying to think. I feel like there was something fairly recent I've seen him in, but he's one of those actors, like, you see him in so much, you're like, oh, you recognize him, like, once you've seen his face. Because I thought when I saw his name in the credits, I'm not even going to, like, attempt to, like, say his name, like, off the top of my head, because I'm just going to butcher it. But it's a name I slightly recognize on, like, I won't be able to recall it, but it's one of those names, like, I see it, I'm like, oh, it's who I think it is, and it turned out to be the case. So, but obviously, it's like, much like the Magisterium keeping people in the dark about, oh, there are other worlds. This guy was like, oh, he doesn't believe Azrael when he's like, hey, there's other worlds out there. The guy's like, oh, okay, what you're telling me is too great for me to actually believe. But it's like, yeah, once again, the whole point is to keep you so blinded, because the last thing you want is is Azrael doing what he's doing, gathering people from all these different worlds to fight this great war. And it's sad too in that world with like the Temple is the one that's in control. There's that he's a father. The commander is a father of two. His youngest is okay, but his oldest, she was kind of basically the way Azrael puts it, is like, right, the demons are there. Demons are just a representation of your soul, and that link between a demon and that it's human, or rather a human and their demon. Yes, a demon's inside, basically meaning your soul is there, and they sever that connection to your soul because it's about making you subservient, which is so sad and ironic considering, one, he used the same device that is used by the Magisterium, used by his ex, his baby mama, used that same device to go on his journey because, once again, one life for the many, sacrifices have to be made, and when it comes to war. So there's that. Plus, once again, your baby mama was perfecting this device and stuff like that. So, and also, you didn't want to, but you were even considering, like, I might not have a choice. I might have to sacrifice my own daughter. It also comes back to the point that, like, Will kind of brings up that, like, right, Azrael doesn't even care, doesn't even think about the fact that his daughter's, like, he's like, yeah, his daughter's been taken. Not like he cares. He wouldn't. Because he's so all about his fight. He didn't realize how important he should have. It's this interesting, beautiful dichotomy between Azrael and Miss Coulter. I know I'm a little all over the place. I do apologize. Stick with me here. I do think it's because Azrael, he cares about his daughter. When he saw the commander with his child, like with his youngest, you could tell it made him kind of go like, yeah, it's a reminder of like, he left Lyra behind. He's continuously left Lyra behind because this is for the greater fight. It's all for your sake in the end. And so he's kind of leaving her behind to fight this great fight for her sake. What is Miss Coulter doing? She is smothering her. She is keeping her prisoner, keeping her so tightly close. And it's like, why? Because you're trying to protect her. Both are trying to, in their own way, trying to do what's best for Lyra. But what's best for Lyra lies somewhere in between her own choices. Because what was that line from Roger in the first episode of the series? Like, she's special. And what did Azrael say? He kind of said, everyone's special. So it's like, it's a situation like, which I get what he was saying, like everyone's special. Everyone deserves to be able to be themselves, to be unique and not have to be held and strangled by the Magisterium. But Lyra is special, and he probably doesn't know about the prophecy about who she's meant to be. And if he did, he would know. But sadly, it is that thing of he had to go on his journey so she could go on hers, because everything she's been through has been preparing her and growing her into who she's meant to be, who she's destined to be, the person who's meant to do away with destiny and entirely. You know, this is about saving not just her world, not just Will's world, every world in this upcoming fight against the authority. And there's this interesting line from Azrael where he was kind of talking about he almost made it sound like he was saying like death's a fallacy, which the commander was like, no, I've seen death firsthand. And he was like, basically the way Azrael was kind of putting it, and I'm going to butcher it, so I'm paraphrasing it, he made it sound like they did something, the authority did something to death. And I'm curious if that ties into Lyra's situation, because Lyra's stuck in his sleep because of it's like, oh, like the girl that she was signing with, it's like, oh, you're bringing me plants and stuff. And it's like, oh, my daughter, she's in this enchantment to put her to sleep. I'm trying to wake her up. I was like, you put her to sleep? I was like, first I was like, wait, do you not know how to wake her up? It's like, no, that's your excuse to make the girl think like, okay, you're just staying here long enough to protect your daughter and wake her up. It's like, no, you can continuously drug her and put her to sleep. Do you know how twisted that is? That and how much damage you're probably doing to Lyra? Like, once again, we don't know the time frame, but it's definitely had to be days, maybe like a week or two. Like, I mean, because we have no idea, like, how long Will spent in each world trying to get her. Like, I mean, I'm sure that's where you can kind of cut around the fact is of, yeah, like, obviously both, like, Lyra and Will are obviously their respective actors have obviously gotten older. But that made me almost, like I said, wonder if there's a parallel there, because, like, in her sleep, and that's kind of something you constantly hear, that sleep is kind of that in-between space between life and death. And who does she keep hearing it? Because I don't remember if I saw that post credit scene at the end of season 2 where Lyra heard Roger, and now she's hearing Roger again, which obviously you can tell he's gotten older. But the fact is that it's like there's a whole bunch of people around. I was like, wait, has death been messed with? Because the way he made it sound, it's like, right, death isn't what it kind of was or what it should be at the very least or something. So I'm wondering, could the authority be shepherding people to, like, they're keeping their souls kind of in a limbo space to make themselves stronger? It's like, that's how I feed on their souls. It's like, rather than kind of passing on into the natural flow of things, you know, maybe you could make the argument it's kind of like, go by like FF7 standards, it's like a live stream situation. And it's like, hey, I'm sucking up all that live stream and those souls and stuff like that. That could be where Roger is, and Lyra's tapping into it because sleep is that place in between the living and dead, the living and the dead worlds. Like maybe that's what it is, or maybe I'm reading too much into it. But I thought that was so interesting that he kind of made that point. And since I am back on the topic of like Azrael really quickly, I am curious like what that device. I was about to say it makes sense how he was able to, because I was about to say like obviously the device needs to be charged by the severing connection between a soul, you know, like a soul being sliced. But I guess by having his demon and him on both sides touching it at the same time, it's kind of almost, it's not the same, but it's supposed to, I guess, mimic almost like the severing. It's like the energy of, like, it's like, right, let's hit the switch at the same time. And it's like a transfer of energy between, you and your soul, and that energy meets up in the middle and creates. So they found a non-deadly way to do it now, which I'm like, well, it doesn't help Roger's circumstances. But now part of me wonders, like, back to it, if that is the case, will that allow us to see like characters like Lee, Boreal, like will they kind of delve down that front or not? Since we got Roger, it makes me feel like that kind of leaves that door up. Like, I'm not saying like they're going to be resurrected, but I think it's about clearing the stage of making it so that they can finally find peace and move on and not be funneled into this, basically used as energy. That's my assumption about what that whole thing is. But Lyra being there, like, that's the thing of, once again, Marissa's attempt to protect her daughter might be putting her in more danger. Especially because her attempts to find Lyra and everything, she put Father McPhail in a very powerful position, and he's only gotten stronger. It's no longer like, oh, no longer Cardinal. It's like, I'm Father President. I was about to say President Father. It's Father President. And so he's ruling with an iron fist, or as the term I used more recently was like, right, describing the magisterium as a totalitarian regime that it is. But, I mean, even without Miss Coulter's interference, the magisterium would have always been this totalitarian regime. It would have always been that way, but I feel like she knowingly yet unknowingly put a monster, she gave that monster all that power, you know? And it's like, right, she also sent him after the witches, so like in her attempts to protect Lyra, she did so much devastation. I mean, Lyra even said it last season, what makes it so tough about her mom is like, she can be good, but then she goes off and does terrible things, like separating the demons from children in her attempt to understand dust, and then killing so many people, being responsible for so much death. And it's just kind of like, right, are you really in a position to protect Lyra? Because now, because of all that you've done, McPhail's like, oh, we got to find this child because I know who she is, just like Miss Coulter knows who she is, and it's like, right, I got to protect my daughter from the destiny that, like, she cannot fall because she's Eve, right? Well, the magisterium knows, like, right, it's going to be the end of everything if she falls, so we can't let her get tempted by the serpent, so let's bring her in. So he's kind of, you know, it's like, and Miss Coulter is just, I mean, they're even using the technology she used to try and find Lyra in season 1, the spy bugs. They're using that. Well, Father Gomez is. Now, I'm immediately suspicious of Father Gomez because I'm like, are you an insider? Are you like someone on the inside who's fighting against the magisterium? Because the moment Father McPhail mentioned Eve, he walked away. He was acting so calm, like, oh yeah, I'm your guy. Oh, this person wrote this particular like book that's kind of stands against what we run. Well, we need to make everyone who got this book suffer ramifications publicly, because fear is basically a good way to kind of motivate people to kind of fall in line. But then he was like, right, the actual author of the book needs to suffer something that will be more long lasting, will leave some wounds, you know? But then the moment he was done talking and he left, he kind of was like, oh, like he was sighing relief, like, oh my God, I had to keep up this front, I gotta let it go. So I'm like, are you an insider or something? Or are you kind of having to play this role? I'm like, is that what that's about? Because at first I was wondering, like, you don't think he's like a witch in disguise or something like that? Like someone, like maybe there really was a Father Gomez that this person's disguising themselves as? Or is it just kind of like, no, he really is Father Gomez and he was having that reaction because he's like, oh my God, the end times are amongst us because Eve is real, like the prophecies are coming true and like, oh my God, Eve and everything, this is it. So I don't know if that's what that was about. Something that's always also going through my head, and I'm curious how people are going to feel about it. Once again, it's just like, it's one of those things once you see it, you're like, oh, how's people going to feel about that? And twofold. One, the fact of the matter is the angels that were with Will earlier in this episode, they're a couple, and they're two guys, and immediately I'm like, oh, that's going to be interesting because I'm like, immediately my brain's like, well, there's going to be people like, oh my God, whoa. Yeah, yada, right? But there's also the religious side of me, well, not of me, but I'm like, I know like there's some religious people who are not down for homosexuality. I'm like, is that why that was done in kind of like conjunction? I mean, to be fair, it kind of flows with the whole thing of like, some religions, a lot of a religion, I feel like, is very like homophobic and very anti-homosexuality. So it's making a statement of making these two angels be, but it could also just be the thing of like, well, angels might be genderless. It might not, I mean, I feel like it's more of a statement if they are, but it might just be like for angels, the whole gender situation and sexuality, it's so like fluid that it doesn't matter. It's kind of not even like we are. I mean, they might be like non-binary, a celestial standpoint, so that might be what that is. But I just feel like that's kind of making a statement, making these angels gay. And I just thought that was kind of interesting. I was like, oh, I could see that pissing people off or something. I don't know if that's something straight out of the book or that's a choice that they made for the TV show. Either way, I'm like, I could see that like bothering two different groups of people. I don't know, once again, sadly you can't think because of the way people's mind works. Sometimes I'm just like, I can't help but be like, oh, that's going to piss someone off. Like my brain is wired to think that now because I've seen too many videos on the internet of people complaining about stuff like that and using the word woke. And I'm like, oh God, I've even heard someone use the term the gay agenda. So that was interesting. But one of the angels went to Azrael's side to tell him about Will and the blade. The other one's kind of stuck with Will and doesn't want to be there because it's like, no, we need the blade and let's just go. Like Lyra's not important. It's like she means everything because Will doesn't know who Lyra really is, and the angels don't know who Lyra really is because Azrael doesn't know who she really is. I guarantee you he never mentioned to anyone like, hey, I got a child, because it's like, that's not important. It's like there are plenty of children around. This battle's too important. Once again, it's just the sad relationship that they have is kind of a necessary evil for the path that she needs to go down. So Will does end up running into Yorick, which I think is they had to have done that on purpose because Lyra referenced like Will being brave like Yorick, because Yorick is like one of the bravest people she knows, and she made a comparison that Will is like him, and it's like the two of them would meet. And I love that he challenged Yorick to a battle. I'm like, yeah, you got that subtle knife. I'm like, yeah, no, sky armor is going to protect you. And he's like, oh, like, how about we make it fair? I get some of your sky armor. It's like, oh, this is sky armor. Nut could cut through it, right? And slices through him. Like, oh, because you don't get to see him like just slice through stuff, like except for like cutting into like opening windows to other worlds, but just using it at the other side of the blade to slice through any and everything. I'm like, but like seeing it cut through like so smooth, like, you're like, oh, it's so good just because of what it represents. And even New York's like, I can't beat that. Like, that blade is too powerful and too dangerous. You win. And it's like, cool. But was also like, yeah, but I stopped you from hurting innocent people, but also released his bear. And I guess because also like they probably did that because Yorick and his people, the armored bears, are vulnerable right now. Once again, like their food supply is probably running out, so they probably had to trying to move to new territories, finding the food, and their environment isn't what it was before. Because once again, we focus on it. They brought it up last season about the ice is melting. Well, no, that was actually not even last season. That was season 1, I believe that came up. No, it was season 2 where they talked about that. I'm also curious where Seraphina is. The last time we saw her, she was on her way to get back to Lyra and them after Lee died. So maybe she kind of went off on her own. Like, probably by the time she probably got there before Will did and found her sister dead by one of the specters, killed by Miss Coulter. Miss Coulter used one of the specters to kill one of her sisters. And she probably went on looking for Lyra after the fact. Which I was like, when Miss Coulter was like, at the end of the season, like, I'm going to take you somewhere safe. I thought Gaza, once again, I'm probably butchering that place's name. Just because it's like, right, she has such control over the specters there. But I'm like, it turns out they're back in her world because the little girl at the beginning, I was like, it has to be their world because she has a demon. And so obviously, it makes me almost go like, it seems like Lyra's world is the only world with demons. We've seen like a couple worlds so far, and it just seemed like it's only her world that has demons. So the moment that happened, I was like, oh, like Miss Coulter and Lyra have to be back in their world. I wonder why this particular place is where she decided to hide. I wonder if there's some kind of significance to it. Is it a place connected to her or her dead husband? I wonder, is there like some connection? Like, why would she know this specific place, and why would this place be somewhere no one would find you necessarily? I don't know. I thought that was so fascinating. And and I guess it makes sense in the long run, but it's definitely like after it's something I noticed a lot more on a rewatch of how abusive obviously she is. Like, I mean, it was apparent, but now it sinks in. Maybe it's just me now being older to paying attention to some of the nuances of the story of how abusive Marissa is towards her own demon. Like the way she like hurts him or kicks him around and stuff, because it's like, hey, because even to the point Lyra woke up and her demon didn't do anything. Her demon just waited and then eventually woke her up. Wanted to kind of give Lyra a head start, I believe, but Lyra's too drowsy and too worn down because it's probably like her body probably hasn't moved in days, so she's probably too sleepy and just too weak. But the demon kind of sold her out because it kind of had no choice because Miss Coulter was there, because at least before she was asleep, but now it's like she's awake, so I kind of have to go along with it. But it does seem like her demon is trying to talk her out of doing what she's doing. And she even later on said, like, right, I was hoping he would be here. I wonder, did she leave a message to Azrael about what was going on with Lyra, and he's been so caught up in his war, he hasn't gotten a message yet, or he's ignored the message because the war is too important, so on and so forth, right? But her demon is always, your demon is supposed to represent literally your soul. And Miss Coulter is always pushed down because like she feels like that soul is kind of like that. The monkey's her demon's a representation of her weakness. And it's like, I'm going to bury everything that makes me human. Even if I have to be a monster, if it means I get to protect my daughter, then I'll embrace that monster, And it's sad too, because by embracing that monster, you're just making your daughter more and more fearful for you. But for her, it's like, right, my daughter could dislike me, she could not trust me, but it's all for her sake. That need to protect your child has gotten so twisted and distorted, and she doesn't realize that yet. Because it's setting the stage for kind of like the trickle effect of how all this is going to lead to the end, the war, the finale of this series and everything. So it's definitely going to be really interesting to ultimately see where the next episode takes us with all of this. I've avoided the trailer like crazy. I've seen like screenshots of the trailer just because I was getting a thumbnail for this month's watch list, which included it's something I screenshotted from the trailer. So even so, I don't have context for any of the trailer. I just found a spot in the trailer and I was like, oh, this would be a good picture for the thumbnail, and I took a screenshot from the trailer. So I've not seen the trailer, and I made a point to do that. And so please don't tell me what's actually coming up. Like I said, I like theorizing stuff. I also like to sometimes when situations like this, considering how quickly the new season was around the corner. Plus, I wanted to rewatch the first two seasons, which I ended up doing. I wanted to try and go into this new season with knowing as little as possible. So I have no idea what to fully expect going forward. I'm very excited to see ultimately what happens as we continue into the final season. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.